So, inverse normal, that's the new thing I'm going to teach you, and this time I'm just going to go right there on the calculator. Would everybody please find inverse normal? Hint, it's under distur again. What does that stand for? Well, it's short for distribution. And this is a type of distribution problem. So it's under distur, inverse normal. They could have done a better job of naming that, okay? But it's going to be the key for today is using that. Now, again, we have people with old calculators and people with new calculators. Well, people with new do have an advantage. And again, if you were forced to do this with the old calculator, you're going to be asked to enter 3 numbers. If you've got the new one, it asks you the questions and is like, what is this, what is this, and what is this? All right, this time, the first number I'm going to actually wait on, and I'm going to explain what they are in a second. But this is really easy. It's the mean of the data, as in the average number. Okay, and this is the standard deviation again. See how important the standard deviation is to calculating almost anything? All right, so you'll need the mean and the standard deviation. This time I'm going to do ACT scores. Did you know that the average across the nation is a 20? And you might be like, no, I heard that my friends are all getting like 26s, 27s. Well, that's because we're in a pretty good school. The mean across the nation is a 20. The standard deviation is how far off each person's score is from each other. It's kind of like the average deviation. It's not. It's much more complicated than that, but I'm going to say that for the ACT, that the standard deviation is going to be 3. I actually haven't researched that. I actually want to know now, so I'll look it up later. Focus, please. Please don't talk, gentlemen. Gentlemen in the back, please don't talk. Thank you. All right, so now this number in the front, what the heck is that? Well, if I'm talking about ACT scores, and I said that the average was 20, that means if I made a bell curve and the average was at 20, and you know the standard deviation deal is that you go out, one standard deviation in both directions, and you get 68% of the people are in there. That's what you're supposed to know so far. Then this new thing allows you to figure out, let's say, what does the bottom 30% of scores, would you agree that if I shaded in this, that might be about 30% of the people? If I go all the way to the middle, it would be half of the people, right? So 30, you agree I got about 30%? Well, then there's some number right here, which is the score that gets you the bottom 30%. If I put a 0.3 right here, it'll tell me what score on the ACT would give you that bottom 30%. So a 20 is a ACT score. I'm guessing it's probably like a 17-ish. I'm not sure though, but let's actually do it. Do inverse normal. We want this to be the bottom 30%. We put in a 0.3. Mean 20. Standard deviation 3. And you put commas in between. You hit enter. And then 18 point what? 4. Can you guys agree on 18.4? Would you agree on that? Yeah. Okay. So then an 18.4, let's make sure you understand what it is. It's an ACT score that would be at the 30th percentile. Do you get what I mean by that? You're on the bottom, 18.4 is not great. You're on the bottom 30th percentile. Do you get that it would be very tempting if the question had asked, if you're in the top 30th percentile, it would have been very tempting to type in 0.3, but you'd type in 0.7. I get how that's confusing. It confused me enough that I needed to go to another teacher to make sure I was doing it right. But if you type in the number that you have exactly, what you're getting is below that number. The bottom 30%, that you can type in directly. If you want the top 30%, you have to inverse that flip it around and make it 1 minus 0.3 or 0.7. Do you get if I type in 0.7 here? It'll tell me what that top 30th percentile number is. Let's do it. Type in 0.7 and the 20 and then 3, and then let's figure out what that top 30% number is. If you use 0.7, Albert, you seem to be getting these right. What'd you get?
21.6.
21.6. That means if you get a 21.6, you're in the top 30th percentile. Seems like 70th percentile, but no. This is kind of like the inverse of what you'd expect if you're doing above that number. Okay? All right. I get how that's going to be confusing, but you're going to have two ways you can go with your number. You can either type in 0.3 or 0.7, and if you type it in and you look at the number and you're like, wait a minute, that's not right, you can always do it the other way. You know what I mean? Like, there's only two ways you could do it, 0.7 or 0.3. All right. Now, I'm going to pause for just a second, and I'm going to actually look up the standard deviation of ACT scores. Or did you? Oh, thank you. Fantastic. 5.4. So I'm going to give you a real question now. I do know that the average is 20 if you round it to a whole number. This is the average. And the standard deviation apparently is 5.4. I know we can't believe everything we see on the internet, but I'm guessing that was for at least one of the years, that was probably the standard deviation. All right. Now, I'm an ACT tutor in real life. I help kids get really good scores on their ACT, and I'm tutoring somebody tonight, for example. And if this kid wants to be in the top 1% of ACT scores, let's see what they would need to get. If they need to be in the top 1%. The average is 20. Now, should you type in 0.01? If you tried that, you'd see a really weird answer, and hopefully you'd realize, no, I'm doing it wrong. Instead, if you want to be that top 1%, then you'd put in 0.99. Long, did you get it?
Yeah, I got 32.6.
32.6. Do you get that's basically a 33 ACT, if we're going to round it? Do you get a 33 ACT? Is a really good score. 36 is the perfect ACT. So if you want to be in the top 1%, there you go. You want to be at a 33. And I actually had heard that before, that a 33 is top 1%. And look at that. We just proved it using inverse normal. Does that make sense? All right. Now let's do another one that's, I feel like you could use these three numbers. And if I give you any average, any standard deviation, and then top whatever percent, you should be able to use this in the real world. I think it's kind of cool. So let's do IQs. Do you remember what the average IQ is?
100.
Very good. Do you remember? I told you the standard deviation of IQs, 15. And what if, I'm not saying this is true, but what if somebody said, to be a genius, you have to be in the top 1% of IQs? I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying, you know, you could ask the question some other way. My friend says he's in the top 1% of IQs. Then what is his IQ? All right, inverse normal. And the first thing you do is type in, and this is where you could mess up. Do you get if you typed in 0.01? You'd get this answer that just doesn't seem right at all. I hope you'd be able to then go, oh, wait a minute. No, it's the other way. 0.99 would be top 1%. What did you get for that, Carter?
I don't know how to type it in.
Okay, this is the part where we need to have somebody like you can check with. So I'm gonna pause for a second and have you compare with the kid next to you. I'm gonna pause. Okay, I've heard a bunch of people say 134. What was the decimal?
0.89.
So would you agree about 135?
Yeah.
I have heard that 135 is like a genius level IQ. So this could be right. Maybe it's the top 1% of people. Okay. Now, does that mean smartest person in the world? No. Think about it. If 1% of people, and there's 8 billion people, do you get 1% of that is a lot of people have a 135 IQ or higher? Okay. All right. So let's do one last question on this to make sure you get which way to go. So, you want the best soccer players on your team, okay? And the people get a ranking by the coach of 1 through 10, okay? Let's say that the average ranking is a 5. The standard deviation is a 2. So in other words, most people aren't a 5. Most people are almost like an average of 2 away from a 5. 10 is like the perfect soccer player for your age. And you want to build a team and you say, okay, I want a really good team. So I only want the people that are in the top 30%. Top 30%. What rank would they need to have to be in the top 30% of the soccer players? Well, of course, it's inverse normal. And please compare your answer with the kid I paired you with. Okay, Carter, explain why you never actually put in 30% into this thing.
Because I think it's because
What do you put in instead of 30%? Yeah.
0.7.
If I had done 30%, it would have told me what? If I had done 0.3 here, instead of the answer I wanted, what would it have done? It would have given me the bottom 30%. Good. And I want the top 30%. So whenever you want the bottom one, you can put it in directly. If you want something above that, above 30%, then you got to do the inverse, I guess you'd say, of it. All right. What was your final answer for that one, Max Hawks?
6.05.
So if a kid had, did you guys agree with the 6.05?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if a kid had a 6 ranking, that's close enough. We probably qualify. He's in the top 30%. Okay, good. I feel like you get it. And that's a good thing because today's got 2 jobs. One is to teach you that, and then there's just a short little Schoology quiz on it. The other is to help you review for the top 20 test, which is happening tomorrow. It is worth 8 homework assignments at once. 8 homework assignments at once. So the top 20 is really, really important. Now, I couldn't do that and then say, oh, too bad, you had a bad test, you guys got to deal with it. Nah, when it counts that much, I have to allow retakes. Okay, so you could have a retake on it if it goes badly. But for most of you, I'd say the average in here is like an 18 out of 20 on the top 20. But there's still a few holdouts that are like, oh man, I never get that good a score. Today is your day to fix it. So we're going to do a top 20 in class with a partner. And you're going to work all the problems together. And if you don't know how to do it, both of you are like, I don't remember that. Then I come over and help both of you, okay? But don't call me over unless you talk to your partner first, of course. All right, but before we end our lesson time then today, I'm going to do a few with you. But for these, I'm going to have you do it on the back side of the paper, top 20. I'm just going to give you this first one to do on your iPad while I hand out the paper ones. And that is, do you remember the distance formula? I described it as a fight club because something is fighting each other and then the other ones are fighting each other. If you don't remember it, boy, you're going to probably get the distance wrong. The other one is the midpoint. Do you remember how to do midpoint? Hint, in the middle of two things is kind of the average of those two things. So I'm going to give you a couple points, and I'd like you to say 2 comma 10 and 4 comma 20. I'd like you to try to figure out the distance between them and the midpoint of them. Without my help, I'll remind you in a minute of how to do them. But you and your partner that I just assigned you, work on these, try to figure out the distance and the midpoint before I even hand you the top 20. A little warm up.
It's
Okay, let's see who knew it and who didn't.
plus. It's minus in the parentheses, plus, it's plus out there. Plus out there.
Did you remember to put a minus inside with, that's a fight, you know, and fights are negative, right? And they're squared up against each other, like that's kind of like a fight too. And then there's only one plus sign in the middle. Raise your hand if you had that right. All right, that's about half of you. Understand that in my other class, which is pre-calc, only 2 kids in the whole room knew that formula. So if you knew that, awesome. You're ahead of the game when it comes to pre-calc. All right, on the midpoint, that's where you're kind of trying to find the middle of this and this. Well, what's in the middle of 2 and 4? 3. What you could have done is add them together and divide by 2. Same thing with the other part. You could have added 10 plus 20 and divided by 2. So that'd be 30 divided by 2 is 15. So that's 3 comma 15. Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
Okay. Now, here's another one that tons of kids have a way, but it's a slow way. They like, okay, I'll multiply it all the way out. And then I had one kid last hour who was like, x squared plus 16. No. What's wrong with that?
It's slow.
And it's not just because it's slow. It's because it's x plus 4 and x plus 4 like that. It's not just x squared plus 16, okay? So if something is squared, it really means this. But if you're going to do it that way, you're doing it the really slow way. Let me show you the fast way. X plus 4 quantity squared equals 11. You square root both sides. It gets rid of the squared. Boom, it's gone.
Oh, it's only plus or minus.
But here's a common mistake answer is, oh, I just got to subtract 4, I'm done. Nope. When you square root a variable, listen, gentlemen, when you square root a variable, you need absolute value, which means you'll get 2 answers. You'll get x plus 4 is the square root of 11, just like you thought. And you'll also get x plus 4 is equal to negative square root 11. That's the fast way to do this problem. Final answer, once you've subtracted 4 everywhere, is negative 4 plus and minus the square root of 11. Now I get there's a quadratic formula you could have done, but in my opinion, a 16-part formula is not the fast way. What I just did, that's the fast way. Yes?
Is this putting a plus or minus on the right side the exact same thing as the absolute value? Because then at the end you get.
I get what you're
-4
saying,
plus minus.
but you need to know mathematically what is happening is that this is an absolute value. Like that's a real thing. It isn't just like, here, let me show you the simplest one. X squared equals 16. I get what you want to do is you want to go square root, and x equals plus and minus 4. But what technically that's wrong because you're saying that the square root of 16 is 2 things, and it's not. If you want to get to that right answer, which is plus and minus 4, you have to show that the square root of 16 is 4. That's just 4. It's positive 4. But that's the absolute value of x. And again, this is complicated. Some math teachers don't even understand it. But the square root of a variable is the absolute value of the variable. And that gives you 2 answers. X equals 4 and x equals negative 4. And I know what you're trying to do, but you don't want to imply that the square root of 16 is 2 things, because it isn't. Got it? Okay, good. All right, so now for the rest of the hour, your only job is to finish this. And this is a paper worksheet. At home, you're going to do that Schoology quiz that is about inverse normal. It'll take you like 10 minutes. That'll be super easy. This is painful, but you got a partner. Try to get it perfect. If you and your partner both don't know how to do it, I will walk over and help. Because today is just like the warm-up. Tomorrow is the real thing. I can't help you tomorrow.
Why?
I can help you today.
You gave this to me? Why did you switch it?
I don't know, why would you come on?
Why did you have to
No reason.
Check, you just get here.
Nothing.
You have pass?
Okay.
Come on up here, he's in no partner. You're just starting. Okay. Good. And for the rest of the hour, we're just finishing this, and your Schoology quiz is your homework for at home. If you can do both, awesome. Just so you know, some kids are like, oh, I got to do this for half an hour. You can finish this in 8 minutes if you're really good at it. 8 minutes. If you're amazing, you could finish it in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. That's the fastest ever. Okay, so this is not a all-hour thing. If you want to go slow, it's fine. But it shouldn't take more than 20 minutes.